Chris Kieran, Assistant Director at Education.
Councillor Fiona Baker.
Lead member for West Northants for Children, Families and Education.
Thank you. Daniel Lister.
Hello, Daniel Lister, Lombard Ward Councillor and Assistant Cabinet Member for Education at West Northants.
I didn't just say Daniel because I've got another Daniel Perryman.
Hi, I'm Daniel Perryman from the NASUWT Teachers Union.
Thank you. Eliza.
Hi, Eliza Hollis, Executive Head Teacher of the Forest Federation and the Primary Maintained Representative.
Thank you. God, my list of participants is moving, which is very difficult. Joshua.
Hi, yeah, I'm Joshua Coleman. I'm from East Midlands Academy Trust.
Thank you.
Thanks for subbing.
Karen Lewis.
Yes, Karen Lewis, Head Teacher of Billingbrook School, also representing special schools in West Northamptonshire.
Thank you. Lindsay Croyland.
Yeah, Lindsay Barnett. Sorry, yeah, I'm Lindsay Barnett, and I'm the Executive Head Teacher for 4 nursery schools in a federation, 2 in the north and 2 in the west. But obviously, I'm representing the West nursery schools.
Thank you. Richard Paul.
Hello, yes, I am Richard Paul. I'm the schools convener for Unison. I have 2 days in the west and 2 days in the north allocated to me. Thank you.
Rod Walsop.
Yeah, hi Peter, Rob Warsat, Regional Director for the David Ross Education Trust in Northampton.
Thank you. Gosh, you're all changing on my list, which makes it really difficult. Daniel York.
Afternoon all, I'm Daniel York, Head Teacher Onsbury Park Primary School and also represent Maintain Primaries.
Okay. Vanessa Bradley.
Hi everybody, Vanessa Bradley. I'm Co-Chair of Governors at Kingsthorpe College and I'm representing academies.
Brilliant, thank you. Emily Taylor.
Hello, Emily Taylor, Strategic Finance Business Partner for Capital Children and Education in West Northamptonshire Council.
Thank you. Chris Wickens.
Afternoon, Chris Wickens, Head of School Place Planning and School Admissions at West Northants.
Hayley Walker.
Hi, yeah, I'm Hayley Walker. I'm the manager of Black from Good Neighbours Nursery as part of the PVI sector of the early years team.
Thank you. Holborn House Day Nursery are on there.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm the manager at Holborn House and also the PVI representative for early years with Hayley.
Thank you. Ian Massey.
Hi, I'm Head Teacher at Spon School in Tolster and I'm representing the Southwest Area Northants secondary schools.
Brilliant, thank you. Jenny Thorpe.
Jenny Thorpe from Northampton College.
John Lake.
Hi everyone, yeah, John Lake, Chair of Governors at Althorpe Partnership and Primary Maintained Representative.
And Lee Hughes.
Afternoon, Peter. CFO, Lee Hughes, CFO at PDET, Academy Representation.
Rose Kavanagh.
Afternoon, Rose Kavanagh from the HR policy at the council. Having issues with my camera, so apologies for the voice from the dark.
I've got one that just says Wheeley here, W-H-E-A-L-E-Y.
Hello, Will Healy, Education Skills and Funding Agency, Stakeholder Engagement Team Lead, just here to observe.
All right, okay, welcome, thank you. Now, you've all been changing on my list. Is there anybody I've missed out?
Yes, it's me, Peter. James Shrine. I'm Head Teacher at Hospital and Outreach Education. I'm representing alternative provision.
Thank you. Sorry for missing you out. It's anybody else we've missed? Good. Welcome, everybody, anyway. So just to say, in this, I mean, if you want to come in, do raise your virtual hands. But if I don't spot you, just please feel free to unmute yourself and shout at me. But if otherwise you can mute yourself, otherwise it it can be a bit of a cacophony of noise on these things. But yeah, if you need to say anything, raise your virtual hand. If I don't spot you, as I say, give us a shout. Okay, apologies for absence. Any apologies for absence and forum membership changes?
Yes, I have, Richard Paul from Unison. I've got apologies from Elaine Coe from the NEU. She's having to teach today. They're obviously struggling with staff.
Of course. Well, that's the most important job in the end, isn't it? Anything else, Paul?
Yeah, Chair, no apologies from forum members other than to formally welcome James Shrine as our new Alternative Provision Academy representative.
Oh, James, welcome. And I'm sorry, it was you I missed out on your list, so I doubly apologise.
No worries.
And also, I've been advised that Nikki Lamond is stepping down as a forum member. She was on both North and West and is stepping down to concentrate on the North. So after Christmas, we will go out and recruit. I think we've got a couple of academy vacancies now, so we'll be recruiting to fill those vacancies early in the new year.
And I've also picked up a chat saying Kelly Mills, early years manager, has given her apologies. Her laptop's not working.
Okay. Can we just thank Joshua Coleman for subbing for Paul Wheeler at quite late notice, Chair?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody want to declare any interest? No, good. Minutes of the last meeting held on the 19th of October. Can I confirm these as a true and accurate record? I don't see anybody else shouting at me, so we assume they are. Thank you. Item number 4 is the 2021-2022 DSG monitoring, and Emily, I think, is going to lead on that.
Yes. So I'll take the paper as read, but I'll pick up sort of some of the key points within the paper. So this is the latest forecast outturn position for this financial year for the dedicated schools grant. The last position that we reported to Schools Forum in October was the period 5 position. So you'll see that there's no change on the face of it in the overall forecast position that we're reporting. So a forecast overspend of 2.4 million, and that's entirely in the high needs block. So that represents 1.78% of the budget after recoupment and 0.62% of the gross budget. So we remain below the level for the requirement for a DFE deficit recovery plan. However, obviously the forecast overspend is structural in nature. Therefore, if we don't sort of plan to address this going forwards, it will lead to greater pressures in future years. So whilst there's no overall movement in the 2.4 million, there have been movements within the high needs block on the forecast over and underspends we're expecting. So the main swing from the prior period is in relation to out of county placements, where the forecast has nearly doubled from the prior reported position. So the absolute forecast outturn overspend in that area is 1.25 million. And this follows the September intake, which shows an increase in numbers from the prior year. So there's also a slight increase in the forecast as well for the provision for pupils in schools as a result in increasing pupil numbers, and the overspend against that budget is 1 million. There have been minor movements across the rest of the areas in the high needs block. However, they're the sort of key areas that I need to sort of bring to Schools Forum attention today. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Molly, thank you very much for your paper and your presentation on it. Has anybody got any questions on that paper? I see 2 virtual hands. Daniel York.
Yeah, good afternoon. It was mentioned in our previous meeting regarding the local authorities' strategy about addressing special school places, and obviously with specific reference to the 1.25 million of outer local authority places. Really, it was just a bit more clarity around what that strategy was, and ultimately, what time frame are we looking at in terms of addressing that, given that we're now in December. Very quickly going into the new year. So are we almost anticipating, is this figure for the September just gone, or is it for the September coming up? And what's that figure based on, I guess? So, ultimately I'm trying to gauge, is this going to be an ongoing problem, and how is that going to be addressed?
I think that's one for me, Chair.
Yes, please.
To answer. So this is, although we'll be looking at de-delegations and top slice to help regulate the budget against the expenditure against budget. The most pressing issue for us is the lack of specialist places. This is a countrywide thing, and just by way of background, it comes from the 2014 Act, where there was a huge increase in the number of EHCPs, including post-19s. So that created the demand side. The supply side, there was barely any DFE money for special school and resource places. We have done better than most, but we're still short, I think, of around about 500 places by 2025. So that's the context. The issue, you're quite right to say, well, what are we doing about this? Because it's creating immense pressure, both on mainstream schools with pupils with their EHCPs. Secondly, resource provisions, which are now all full. And thirdly, special schools, where many have taken pupils additional to their capacity. So to come on to what we're doing about it, we are starting to increase provision from September 2022. We've got the capital available to do that in the budget. However, we are short of 3 million for the 200 places that I want to provide for resource provision. That will be over the next 3 years. We could do this relatively quickly so long as we have the money. And I'll be going to Councillor Baker and other members for saying that there needs to be permission for the council to borrow capital money to produce these places, because we will not be able to achieve a balanced budget without capital expenditure. The second element of this is Councillor Baker has been the cheerleader in the council for this. We need another special school. And again, we'll be approaching the DFE to see if there's any free schools money for the specialist sector. I expect the answer to be no, but I've got to pursue that path. If not, there is no other route but the council sponsoring a special school and funding the capital to pay for it. And that could be another 12 million. So it could be, at the moment, we're looking at anything between 3 and 15 million of capital money that we would have to borrow against prudential borrowing. The timescale for that, I hope, would be between now and 2025 or 2026.
Thank you. I'm sure our councillor friends and our friend from the ESFA were listening to that. There was another question, but I've lost the hand.
That was me, Chair. It was, I had a very similar question. So the answer from Chris is answered my question.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Peter, can I just follow that up with
a
further question, if that's possible? So in terms of trajectory, because the impact on the options that were presented to Schools Forum last time, particularly around options 1 and 3, I think, with the local authorities' preferred options. Is that something that's anticipated that's going to be, of course, it's year-on-year review, but based on what Chris is, based on your response there, Chris, it's almost though that isn't going to be addressed within a year, and therefore our schools almost anticipating to have to factor this into their budgets, not only this year coming, but next year.
That's a very good question. I'm not going to ask schools to factor it in at this stage, because I think the first thing, if Schools Forum does approve option 2 that the local authority proposed this time, I think we've got to see how it goes in a year. I'm going to write to the services immediately after the vote if it is for option 2, saying the situation has changed and we've got to think about customer focus and providing schools with what they want in terms of accelerating pupils' progress and attainment and all the things we need to do in order to achieve that. We need a review of how it's gone in the first year, because we're starting it in April. So by the time I come to the October forum, we've had 3 or 4 months when they operate as traded services. And I'll bring a report on surveys that I want the service to do on how it's gone and whether schools believe it's value for money, including those that don't get any service, because obviously it's an insurance scheme effectively you'll be paying for. So at the moment, my view is we will need it for 2 or 3 more years, certainly. But I'm not asking schools to factor into their budget before we had a chance to see how it works.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Any further questions on the report? Oh, I've got, no, I think is that that's my cursor. Sorry, I thought someone had their hand up, but it's my cursor. Right, we'll move on then to item 5, which is 2022-2023 schools funding consultation. That's Beth is going to lead on that. I think this is the outcome of the consultation and the final proposals for voting.
Thank you. Yes, that's me. There are a few annexes, and each annex covers a different part of the consultation. So the first annex that I'm covering is looking at the split site policy and the growth fund policy. The paper starts with a bit of the background, which you've already seen in the previous schools forum, so I won't go through all of that. It's rolling the split site policy forward from NCC and proposing to keep the rates the same. And the permanent exclusion clawback policy is looking to change what we used to previously do to be in line with the legislation for 22-23. So the responses we've had to the consultation in general, we've had 9 responses, one of which covered a number of schools for the PDET, Peterborough Diocese Education Trust. So from those 9 responses, we had 7 responses to the permanent exclusion clawback policy. So not everybody who responded to every question. So there were 7 responses from the 9, and 5 agreed with the change to the permanent exclusion policy. 1 commented no, that leading up to an exclusion, additional funding will have been exhausted before that. So they wanted to recognise the spend that's already taken place within a school before the exclusion. But unfortunately, the legislation doesn't allow us to do that. So if we're following the legislation, we have to follow the clawback formula that it provides. 2 other responders submitted the comment that they agree in principle and that the LA should be able to claw back funding permanently excluded, but they've said that only if the school received that funding for the child at the time, so that they'd have to have been on the census preceding the financial or academic year if you're maintained or academy, respectively. So with regard to that, we have re-looked at our proposal and we have sympathy with that, and we'd like to propose that we would do that if the legislation allows it, so that we would only claw back funding from a pupil for which they've received funding. So the feedback on the split site policy, we had 2 questions. Do schools agree with the policy rolling forward, and do they agree with the rates? We had, again, 9 responses, but not every question was answered within each response. We had 5 in agreement, 1 disagreed, and 1 responder picked other for both of those 2 questions. For the first question, one of those others responded with, there are significant additional costs, other issues with the schools, so not just to do with split sites. For example, being on a very limited bus route has additional costs, and old buildings have additional maintenance costs. And another responder who disagreed with the policy suggested that the rates should be 50%. So they disagreed with the rate, but not the policy, and felt that it should be 50% of the current rates in 22-23 and 0 in 23-24. And in response to that, unfortunately, the national funding formula, when it changed, I think back in 2013, it did away with the vast majority of those kind of very small, specific, local kind of differences between schools, where a school might be in a very old listed building, or might be very rural on a bus route. There are sort of other parts within the funding formula that are meant to cover those costs, whereas the legislation and the guidance for us in operating the national funding formula specifically include a mention of split site formula and have a space within our national formula to put that in, which is why we haven't suggested other one-off costs. So the moving on from the responses, our recommendations to Schools Forum are to agree the proposed split site policy and the rates from 21-22, and to agree with the permanent exclusion clawback policy in the voting stages.
Okay, thank you. So that's that, as I understand it, is 5A. So you're going to have to, I might need a bit of help from Paul on this. So we're looking at the vote on the split site funding and rates, and also the permanent exclusion clawback. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? I see Lee Hughes has his hand up, virtual hand up. Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I just want to get some clarity on, I mean, first of all, obviously, 9 responses is not great, is it, considering how many schools we've got, but that's a different thing for a different day. But of the responses we've got, why would the trust be treated as 1 and not 15 schools if the other individual schools are treated as individual schools votes? Because that changes the narrative of the choices presented, not just in this one, but in some of the other options.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Anybody want to?
Sorry, my connection's not great here, I don't think.
No, well, I've got, they're cutting my edge outside, so we're making a hell of a racket. So I don't do that. Yeah, Beth, do you want to respond to that, or Chris?
No, Beth can respond to this.
Well, I guess it's because you submitted it from the trust. We don't have each individual head's response from each individual school, and their circumstances may be different. I mean, I guess it's presentational. We're aware that that's from a large trust and from a number of schools, and you're one sort of financial organisation.
Yeah, but they requested that they do one response from all the schools.
Okay.
Well, it's whether it's, I guess the question would be if in future things, because it does change, my question would be whether it's one of a collection of responses from a number of schools, or it's a trust line from there. And I think that's something that needs to be considered moving forward, because it changes the options presented if you're going to go with the majority of those that have voted. It's a very different thing.
Yes, I think it was a trust response. As far as I know, the trust asked to do one response, and it was treated as one response. So I don't believe they sort of did a tot-up of all their individual schools, or all their individual schools did a response. The trust did it on behalf.
Yeah, I think
if heads, I mean, head teachers, all head teachers have the option to go on individually. So therefore, it's entirely up to the head teachers to go on and do it. That's what I would say, regardless of the trust. If the trust are saying, we'll do a response on your behalf, then fair enough. But if the trust wanted all the schools, they should then have said to their heads, could you please go on and do the consultation? Like myself, I would go on and do 4.
Yeah,
each of my schools.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
Thank you. I just, before I come to, I see Vanessa's got a hand up. Just before I come to that, I want to just agree with Lee on the disappointment of just 9 responses, taking into account that the trust maybe there's a few additional ones there, but it's a very disappointing number. But there we are. I guess we're all.
Yeah. If I can just respond to that, there's two things. First of all, this is a national issue. People are busy, and what people tend to do is do what is most urgent. And if people are generally content with something, they don't prioritise it. So in all consultations, if it's about a major road, you get hundreds of people at public consultation meetings. If it's something that people don't bother about, they don't tend to bother responding. They're content. And it's a difficult one to sell to people, but that is generally what happened. We did everything we could to publicise to schools that the fact that consultation was out there. We put it in Head West. We kept following it up. We told schools there hadn't been many responses to date, and gave them again the deadline date when there was a week to go. We really did want to encourage participation. Now, schools forum members have got ideas about how to increase that next year. We're all ears, because we'd like the maximum number of consultations responses possible.
Thank you. Thank you. Vanessa, you've had your virtual hand up for some time.
Not a problem, thank you. I'm hoping mine's a very quick question to answer. The permanent exclusion, the increase in the clawback, when is that effective from?
It's the 1st of April next year, as far as I know, Beth. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it should be the financial year that the local authority operates. It always has been in the past, and of course it's called an increase. For some schools, it won't be an increase necessarily. It has a different effect. It's a very complex formula if you've seen it. So it is true, it may collect more money, but paradoxically, you can't necessarily call it an increase. It depends on the individual school.
I got called away by an Amazon delivery. Yeah, April 2022 is when we
2022, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thanks,
Councillor Baker has a virtual hand up.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just wanted to endorse what Chris had said earlier, that everybody did everything they possibly could in order to encourage more people to take part in this consultation. As he said, I'm sure he'd be thrilled if you could all come up with ideas as to how we got more people to take part. But everything that we possibly could do, we have done in order to encourage people to take part. And I kind of go along with his view, really, that if we have issues where people feel really strongly, they come out in force. If they are accepting and think, oh, well, that's what we've got to do, then they don't really bother. But I just wanted to emphasise how hard our team are working on behalf of schools, and to say that they did everything they could in order to get more responses to this consultation.
Thank you. Any other points on these on the votes in 5A? I don't see it. I don't see anybody. Do we vote separately on them?
Yes, there are two separate proposals, Chair. So yes, we do.
Okay. So we're going to vote on the split site funding and rates first of all, and we're voting to say whether we approve the suggestion of the local authority or not. I'm not quite sure who's eligible to vote in this one. Oh, sorry, Joshua has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in the documentation, there's a section I've pasted into the chat about the legal responsibility, and we'd have to get feedback from the ESFA if we were to consider not going with the proposal. I didn't know I know we've got an ESFA rep on the call. I didn't know whether they had any view on that.
That's interesting.
I can take that back to colleagues and ask them if someone wants to formulate a question and send to me. I'll post my email address to you, and you're welcome, and I'll to have something forwarded on.
I guess in the context of us needing to vote now, it's just I'm just wondering if there's any, I'm not asking for policy statements, but if we are likely to be working on a historical model that isn't necessarily within current ESFA guidance and structures, and isn't necessarily aligned to what's happening elsewhere in the country, is there a likelihood that if we were to go status quo, that it would be acceptable to the ESFA, or is that something you can't answer?
I'm afraid that's not my section of the ESFA, but as I say, I'm welcome to, if anyone wants to forward on any questions to my colleagues, I'm more than welcome.
Well, perhaps let's see where we get to. If we do take on the ESFA, we'll see where we get to. Okay, is Paul around to tell me who has to vote?
Yes, he is. We've got our voting framework. Paul?
I don't know where. Is he on there?
Sorry, he has given us the voting framework here. So the split site chair is all members, and the growth policy in places is all members.
All members. Okay. So so we're voting whether we're in favour of the suggestion from the local authority following the consultation. Do you want to raise your hand if you're in favour? You raise your virtual hand or a real hand or whatever. Is somebody able to count this? Sorry, is Paul disappeared off the call or something?
He's vacated his seat, Chairman. I'm not sure why that is. He must have some sort of an issue.
Yes.
And just to go back on what somebody said earlier, no council people will be voting on this. We are not members.
No, it's just people that are members of the forum.
Schools forum, yeah.
Yeah, just people that are members of the schools forum. I wonder if somebody is prepared to. I mean, I'll have a go at counting.
I can go through and count. I'm looking now. One, two, three.
It's telling me that 10 have raised their hand so far.
Oh, thank you. Somebody knows how to work this thing better than I do. Good. Okay, 10 have raised their hand. Thank you.
We're up to 11.
Oh, we're up to 11 now.
You can always put your vote in the chat, and that's recorded.
Hey, Hayley Walker's got a hand
That's
up.
a good
Holborn
idea.
House has got their hand up, so that's 13.
13. Thank you.
Is it a good suggestion to put your vote in the chat window
Yep.
as a record?
And the chat up.
Do both. It
Yeah.
will help.
Yeah. Okay.
Move to those against. I think we've got them.
Yeah. Let's move to those against now. Then. Sorry. So put your virtual hands down if you're in favour. Anybody against? Oh, well, there we are. We needn't bother to worry about it, need we? Okay, that's, I think. Let's move on to the second one, which is the permanent exclusion clawback. Is that everybody or not? Do we know?
It's everybody, yeah.
Everybody. Okay, everybody again. Those in favour of the permanent exclusion clawback? Right, just trying to, yeah, okay. That looks like 10 or 11 again, 12. Thank you. Anybody against? They'll take your hands against.
Excellent.
And it's fun doing this on Zoom, isn't it, eh? Nobody against. All right, those two have passed then.
Well done, Peter.
Let's go on to item B, which is the vote on the additional pupil numbers, growth fund budget, and the growth fund policy and rates. Beth, do you want to speak to this before?
I think this is Chris.
Chris, is it?
Chris Wickens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon, Chris.
Yeah. So, in terms of the report at the previous schools forum meeting, we covered what the policy entails, both for the weighted numbers and the growth fund itself. So I won't take you through it all verbatim again. In terms of the weighted numbers, we're intending to fund a number of new year groups at 7 schools across West Northamptonshire. They include the Radston Academy, Monksmoor Primary School, and Pine and Barnes Primary, Wootton Hall and Northampton International Academy, as well as 2 schools that we had to open this September, Murray Weller Primary in Towcester and Buxton Fields Primary, which is on the edge of Northampton. Obviously, in terms of the growth funds, the policy for the growth funds is, as it states in the report, that gives schools that are requested to provide additional capacity, whether on a temporary or permanent basis by the local authority. It gives them obviously access to the revenue funding that allows them to staff up towards any increase in pupil numbers that is requested by the local authority. And the rates you can see obviously in the report there. If you're a primary school and you're asked to increase by 30 pupils, you'll be able to access support in a region of just under 54,000. Whereas a secondary school can access up to just over 82k for the same purpose. And those costs are based upon average teacher and support staff costs, informed by the school's finance team. So in terms of the consultation that's just been undertaken, if we start with response on the growth funds policy and questions, all respondents were asked if schools agree with rolling forward the current growth fund policy inherited from the county council, and whether or not to use the same rates that were applied in 21-22. And I think I mentioned at the last meeting that these rates were increased for 21-22, so they have been subject to a recent increase. There were 9 responses in total, again from a trust and 8 schools. As Beth has stated in the previous report, not every question was answered within each response. And again, we've had quite a small number of responses relating to this matter. 5 of the responses agreed with the growth fund policy and to fund weighted numbers. 1 responder picked other for the first question, but left no further comment. And all 7 respondents agreed to continuing the rates as they were in the 21-22 policy for this coming financial year.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on this particular aspect of it? I see no hands. So do we have to vote separately on all 3 of them? I imagine we do. Yeah.
I believe so, yes. It's a vote on the weighted numbers and then 1 each on rolling the...
Let's go for that then.
To the policy forwards.
And do we know whether everybody has a vote again? We'll guess so, unless somebody tells us otherwise. Okay, so let's go for vote on the additional pupil numbers, which are the schools there on page 23. Are we all in favour? Yeah, that looks like most people. Thank you. Anybody want to vote against? That's probably the easiest thing to do, isn't it? I've got Eliza and Haley's hand up. Are you voting against or?
They've typed agree in the chat.
Oh, sorry. All right.
Or Eliza has anyway.
Thank you. So that's everybody in favour. Lovely. Let's go on to the growth fund budget. Are we all in favour of the growth fund budget? Yeah, that looks like most people again. Okay, probably easiest to say, anybody want to vote against the growth fund budget? John, you've got your virtual hand up. Are you voting against it or are you?
He's voting for.
No. Okay, brilliant. That's carried unanimously. And finally, to continue the growth fund policy and rates. Are we all happy to do that? We want to vote in favour of that or not? Okay. Anybody against continuing with that? Just checking, Daniel and Haley, you've got your virtual hands up still, are you? No. Okay, so everybody's in favour of all of that. Good, excellent, thank you. Let's move on to the funding of specialist sport and impairment services. Vote on options 1, 2 or 3. Who's speaking to that?
That would be me, Peter.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, I want to just start this with the comments, obviously, on the consultation, and one specific response, which I did say I'd mentioned at the Schools Forum, that I've had from a member since we published the outcome of the consultation, to say they were a little disappointed, and people have made this more general point, at the number of responses we had to such a major top slice. But secondly, that they were disappointed that we didn't put it more prominently in the consultation. And I said, well, I can see that point. We didn't deliberately hide it, but we didn't make it prominent. And I think it's something we need to be thoughtful about as a local authority with Schools Forum members for next year's consultation, about ordering it in terms of the impact on schools. So I did have a correspondence where I said, look, I do appreciate the view. I made the point again about the number of consultation responses, reflecting the fact that people could broadly see what we were trying to do. And indeed, I've had a few conversations with heads telling me that. But on the detail of the consultation, it's in paragraph 2.2. 6 of the schools selected, we only had 9 responses. 6 selected option 2, which was the top slice. The trust selected option 3, which is purely trading. In one school, there was a bit of a dialogue. There were sort of comments, but no, there was no particular response or option selected. And one of the consultation responses didn't respond to this question, so that left a total of 8. Just a little bit of background then about the high needs block. Actually, since vesting day, I must congratulate Emily and Beth on the way they've got to grips with exactly where the problems are with the high needs block. And to say that these problems are not massive compared with many other authorities. I did say this at the last meeting. It's about a 5% overspend, and we're looking at the most overspent local authority, I said this before as well, being 106% over its allocated budget a year ago. So this is not badly managed, but if we don't get a grip, and I do want this authority to get a very rapid reputation with its Schools Forum about being competent managers, whether you agree with what we're doing or whether you don't. And at the moment, Beth has said in her paper on the monitoring of last year's, this year we forecast to be 2.4 million overspend. We've managed to save 300,000. This year, we might be able to get a contingency together of 1 million. If we manage that by the end and we put it into the high needs block, which is obviously the main area of tension, that will mean we're 1.4 million overspent. But of course, there's a 2.4 million structural budget. So we will start next year on April the 1st with a 3.6 million overspend. And we need to save more and more money each year in order to get back to basics, to the zero variance. That will not be achieved by anything we do outside generating more places. And I don't want to pretend that us paying at the moment for something we've got the power to do, but not the duty, and transferring that cost shunting to schools is going to solve it. This is not the major problem, but it will make a significant impact in the short term and give us some breathing space so that we don't have to report to the ESFA on an overall overspend. Because as Emily reported, we've still got some PFI credits left that will enable us at the moment to report a balanced budget. But unless we take action, and this is the first proposed action, we won't be able to do that. I've been thoughtful about presenting this to you for the vote. And one thing I'd want to say is we want to be completely transparent with, first of all, what the nature of the problem is, and secondly, the action plan for dealing with it. I've developed an 8-point action plan with the lead officer for each of the areas to get us back into balance, I hope, within 4 years. If Schools Forum would like to have a subgroup that receives regular reports to officers and then reports back, not by me, but by a member of that subgroup to Schools Forum, to offer them assurance about what we're doing, or that we present it to the full schools forum. I'd like your views on that after the vote or in comments before you move to the vote. So to move to the conclusion of this, as last time, I would like schools forum contributions as set out in paragraph 2.4 of this report for a single year. If schools forum doesn't agree to this, the local authority will fall back on the 0.5% top slice, which we can ask schools forum to vote on. We would have to go to the Secretary of State if schools forum doesn't agree this, doesn't agree the top slice, because the budget will slide exponentially out of control unless we take action. Secondly, if schools forum votes in favour of this, I've said already that I will be in touch with the service about making sure we do proper customer services surveys and are able to report back to schools forum on the impact the money that schools are spending through the top slice is having. So I think that's as much as I want to say, Chair. Obviously, I'm happy to take any more questions before the schools forum moves to the vote.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on this particular aspect? Yeah, Daniel's got his virtual hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Mine really is kind of a joint question, I suspect potentially to both Chris and Beth, and it's around the potential impact of this option on schools where, despite the uplift, there will still be a detrimental effect on their budget. So I know that in the previous forum, Beth spoke about that uplift and therefore there wouldn't be as significant impact. But discussions with colleagues is that there are a small sample of schools that, despite that uplift, it will still impact their budget. So I guess the difficulty is, by applying a one-size-fits-all process, which I understand has to happen through kind of this consultation process, how will the authority support those schools more specifically?
Yeah, I should have given the answer to that question without having to be asked it. So my apologies for that. We will protect individual schools, and the mechanism will be through the high needs block itself. Because if a school has a problem in this area, it will be with the high needs allocation that it has and the money that it's spending to support high needs, of which this is a part. Where a school has a high needs problem and also a general budget problem, that is to say, this would move into deficit, it is entirely legitimate for the authority to use top up from the high needs block. In other words, to allocate back small amounts of the money we save for individual schools that have a problem. Because I agree with the implication of the question being asked. We cannot allow this one size fits all to have a serious deleterious effect on an individual school, and the authority will not allow that.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I suppose my only follow-up to that is what metric that's based on, isn't it? I guess is, a deficit is quite clear, but again, it's at what point, how do we engage within that process, or how do we explore that in terms of accessing those available funds for those particular schools?
Yeah, so the first port of call would be to me as an assistant director. If there's specific problems with a school caused in the high needs block area, or a more general budget problem that is traced back to increased dedelegation of top slice, because it may be that, it may not be the high needs block itself, but obviously there's a number of other things you're voting on which reduce the AWPU. We will take each school in that situation on merit. And we have all the tools within and outside the dedicated schools grant in order to assist individual schools, including, if the problems are more general, a deficit recovery plan and financial support for that. Emily and Beth, do you have anything to add to that as specialist officers?
I think that the only thing I would add is that where a school has a budget issue, a deficit predicted, and it can either be the high needs funding issues you've described, or there tend to be a sort of small other number of reasons, like being a small rural primary school. The funding formula hasn't always worked very well for those specific situations. For goals, which a number of primary schools are facing at the moment, seems to be more common. The maintained nursery schools who aren't funded through this formula tend to have a financial problem. Other kind of reasons tend to be overstaffing, where we would support the schools with restructuring maintained school. So there's sort of a host of reasons why a school might be struggling, and areas that we would look to help them with. And it's not really relating to the top slice. It's, as Chris has said, it's more about looking at the overall budget and where the problem lies.
Yeah, just one thing to add to that, Chair, before any more questions. We did look at the general health of maintained schools and academy trusts with the last possible date, which is admittedly is a little out of date with maintained schools. It's 31st of March. And the overall balances held are very healthy and appropriate, 5.2%. There's 2 or 3 schools with very low balances, about which we're already aware, and we'll closely monitor those. There's another 2 or 3 with a bit lower than 5.2%, 3%, which is lower than I would want to see, and I'm sure the head teachers would as well. We're very highly aware of those schools, and we will keep an eye on them, and we'll treat them extremely sympathetically.
Thank you. Eliza, you've got your virtual hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to know, will this impact on the notional SEN in any way? Because obviously for schools, some of our schools, we have to then constantly ask for a notional SEN top up. Will this affect that pot in any way?
No, it is a separate thing, but I think it's fair to take account of this sort of spending in the notional pot. Every schooling knows exactly what they've got. It is to use to support individual pupils. You could argue as an insurance scheme, this is part of that. And if a school is going over its notional SEN pot that's available, we certainly need to look to the possibility of high needs block support. But notional SEND is only part of what schools get. Obviously, it's a dedicated schools grant. And if a school has a very healthy balance and is extremely well managed, but has a notional SEN overspend against its against the money available through the notional pot, we'd have a discussion with that school about whether it needed extra support from the high needs block, but it would certainly be considered.
Joshua?
Thanks, Chair. No, I mean, it's just Chris partly answered it when he was saying about the numbers of schools that have structural issues with their budgets, really. Because I suppose I'm wondering what specifically Daniel's concern is for what support, because I think obviously we're all in the same issue of the same funding, and we all have to work within the constraints that we operate. So I just don't. I'm not sure if there's a rural school, if there's a specific issue that the school that's outside of the school's control as to why there's a deficit. I get that, but Beth was suggesting there that there's wider things around, overstaffing, and I would just I just want to be clear as to what support is being made available, because obviously if everybody is on this forum and everybody in the county and the country is trying to manage their budget to not be in a deficit, but then others possibly are not for any specific reason other than perhaps delays, changing people numbers. I just want to know what the programme is and what the issue is really.
So I think he did come in himself, but I think it's for me as an officer to give some sort of answer to that. It is often very small schools that have a problem, and I'm very sympathetic with the needs of small schools. It has a greater distorting effect, Joshua. That's the issue. But we would not be giving money out lightly. A school would have to make a very strong case. And there's a very small number of schools that have done that before, by the way, we're looking at anything like this. And we need to make sure our schools are, able to support the pupils in them, which are our residents, and we need to make sure we act properly. So that's
sorry, Chris, didn't mean to cut across you. So yeah, I get that, and I understand the small school issue, and all of us would be sympathetic to that. So in terms of the structure of how, because we're all being asked to vote and contribute to that pot, if there are specific instances where there is support being offered that would impact on the wider budget, does that come through the schools forum to discuss and agree?
No, that wouldn't. We would report it, but it would generally be for that school. Beth, Emily, do you want to offer any more expertise on that?
Yeah, there isn't a specific pot that would cover all schools who they have a financial difficulty. The support tends to be more in terms of sort of you'd need to work with your financial support, which obviously you'll be buying into new financial support from 1st of April. So you'd be working with them, but you'd have our school effectiveness team headed by Katie Morledge. And she has a budget to help where schools get in severe difficulties, but there isn't a pot of funding. We don't have a contingency. So other local authorities might vote to create a contingency budget through dedelegations, which could help schools in difficulty, but only maintain schools. We're very limited and locked down with what we can actually passport onto schools outside of the funding formula. So it's
okay. So the additional funding,
financial support.
the additional funding wouldn't come out of this same ring fence budget. It would be from other areas of the council's budget. Is that what?
Yeah. We're not able to just passport on the schools block unless it's within these the things we're talking about today.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that whether if it was coming from the pot that we were contributing to or voting on, then
sorry, because you're an academy trust, it's slightly different for you. The dedelegations are there to be used almost like a resource that have been an insurance-based type resource for maintained schools, and obviously the trade union academies can buy into, but we've never academies to buy into the other two.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Daniel, did you want to come in again?
Yeah, please, if that's okay. Just from conversations I've had with colleagues, just wanted to note that there are, ultimately, we are where we are, and there is that need to contribute to this wider pot. It's just some of the unknown variables that some smaller schools and schools like my own of my particular size of the unknowns. So an example I would give is the impending increase in PFI costs. And I think that would come, is a bit of a concern for smaller schools because they are unknown. And I think at the moment they're suggesting an increase of around 19%. And obviously that is going to be passed on to schools. So I think, looking at it from a singular perspective, i.e. what we're talking about here, yes, ultimately that's what we're voting on. But I think I would just like it noted that, where there are concerns, it is because of reasons such as the PFI costs that are going to be also passed on to schools.
I think those are noted. Yeah. And I certainly sympathise with regard to PFI. Seems we make up a number basically. Right, thank you. Anybody else want to make any other questions or comments on this? Okay, so my understanding is, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, that we're voting to decide whether we want to go for option 1, option 2, or option 3. Option 1 is to do this through the individual school subscription. Option 2 is the top slice, we all maintain school budgets, and option 3 is a traded service. It sounds to me that the local authority wishes to go for option 2. So I am going to suggest that we vote first on whether we want to do option 2 or not, and then see where we are after that.
Yes, that was what was asked in the recommendation under 3.1, Chair. Quite right.
So and I'm assuming, unless I'm told otherwise, I'm assuming that we all get a vote again, apart from the officers, like.
Every member of Schools Forum votes on this, yes, Chair.
Every member of Schools Forum. So those in favour of option 2. Option 2. Okay, thank you. We've got that. Okay, can I ask if anybody wants to vote for a different option other than option 2? Lee wishes to vote for a different option. Which option do you wish to vote for, Lee? Just make it easy.
Option 1, Peter, for me, thank you.
Option 1, thank you, Lee. Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to vote for an option 1? Okay, so I think it's clear that, not unanimous, but clear that option 2 has been the one that's been accepted. I'm sorry it's a bit confusing, but it's really hard to do.
Right, we will monitor this extremely carefully. I'm grateful for this vote. It's very helpful to the local authority, and we're going to think extremely carefully about whether we need to use this next year or for how many years, and increasingly to make the medium-term plan clear to schools for them and the reason for it. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 1D, the schools block central expenditure. Does anybody want to speak to this?
I think that's you, Beth, isn't it?
Well, it's usually Katie, but I can take it. Is Katie on the call?
Oh, no. Katie's had a family tragedy, actually. Katie isn't here today. So why don't I do that when I get on the right paper?
I mean, people will have read the papers, so it's just, do you just want to answer questions on it, Chris?
Well, I just will say something about the SIG budget. We have historically spent this budget. It's used for direct benefits for schools of concern. It's used for associate head teachers. So it goes back in full to the schools that need to, or the block that pays for it. If we have any under expenditure in a year, we reduce the amount that we need. Currently, we need the amount that we're proposing for dedelegation to maintain schools, Chair.
Thank you. I see that Rachel has a virtual hand up. Rachel?
Thank you, Peter. It's Rochelle, but not a problem.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's okay. Chris, can I just ask a question? Do HR services come under this block of funding?
No, they don't. That's traded. And as you know, there's a rather controversial sort of decision been made in the council, not in my area, that we won't be providing traded services, not economically viable in a traded service context. So no, this is an entirely different thing, Rochelle.
No, thank you.
Apologies to interrupt. Can I check which paper we're on? Are we looking at central expenditure or dedelegations?
I think we're looking at I was looking at dedelegations.
I think we've jumped to E.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, keep going on dedelegations. We'll jump back to DR.
I thought we were on Annex D. Is that not right?
No, I thought we were on central expenditure D.
Yeah. Okay.
We are. So I was talking about Katie. Sorry for the confusion. Beth, what should I be speaking to?
So central expenditure, that's looking at there are two parts to that. There's the historical and then there's the ongoing side. And the ongoing side includes the combined services where we have the 20% reduction each year in that part of the funding. But it says in the legislation and the guidance that we have to vote on a line by line basis.
Even though it's central expenditure that is the local authority budget. So just to make it clear to everybody, these are local. This is one of the four budgets that is it's a local authority budget that's allocated directly to us and only applies to maintain schools. So it is our money. It's not coming out of schools DSG.
Right. But this is mine. I'm looking at pages 31 to 34. Option.
That's entirely correct, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else want to ask any questions on that? Right. There is no way, as Chair, legislation says, there's no way I'm having a vote on every one of these. It's going to take forever.
I'm sorry, it says we have to.
Well, I know. Well, the Chair's decided we're not doing it, so then they can moan at me. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to ask everybody whether there is any item on this that anybody is opposed to. Nothing, right? Can I therefore ask that you, if you're in favour of this, noting that nobody's opposed to any of it.
Vanessa's raised her hand, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, just a very quick question. So the list that has been detailed for us in the agenda, am I right in understanding that all of this comes out of the central service budget?
Yes. That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, so the 4.3 million, which is a reduction on last year, covers all of these items listed on the agenda.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Right, okay, so I'll ask again, just as it's legislation, Is there anybody opposed to any of those items individually stated in the agenda? Joshua.
Peter, in the paper, it outlines the different functions. And in table 3, it says around MASH, safeguarding and others, which have no changes, but then in other areas, they are increasing. I just wondered, especially in the light of COVID and the impact on families and children locally, could I understand from the officers why some of those areas that look like they're targeted towards that family engagement side is not increasing, but others are?
Somebody wants to?
Yeah, I can't answer that definitively, but I can say this is not necessarily the budget that's available, for example, to MASH or supervised contact. It's the amount that we're paying out of the central block. So this is a contribution, it's not the budget for the service. So it could well be that the service budget is going up, but the school's central expenditure contribution is going down, Joshua.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, but I think that's a very good point, Joshua, and I think we want to forum that we would hope that there was sufficient funding for children's services and safeguarding issues in particular, particularly given what's happened recently. Okay, I'm going to do it again. Anybody against any of that lot? No. Right, you can all vote, and I should be told off, royally told off afterwards, but I don't care. Can we all vote on whether we're happy with all that? All of those under D. Excellent, thank you. I think that's everybody that's allowed to vote that can vote. Good. Those have all been passed then. I'm worried that our friend from the ESFA is going to tell me off now. Lovely. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move on to item E. Item E is on pages 35 to 52 and is the primary and secondary maintained schools delegation for trade union and school redundancies. Anybody want to say who's speaking to this, if anybody?
Can I just say, Peter, Richard Paul speaking, Elaine has managed to be released from her class. The pupils have let her out for good behaviour, and I believe Elaine can speak to it. Is that correct, Lorraine?
Muted.
Oh.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
All right, you've been allowed out, have you?
Well, we finished. I wasn't allowed out. No, we've got far too many people off today, as I'm sure you can imagine. It's
yes, absolutely
a little bit of a nightmare. And I've also just had a phone call from my son's school saying that, yeah, he's about to need a PCR test. So it's going to be a busy few days.
Brilliant. Oh, no, that's a real shame. I'm sorry. It's happening all over the place, isn't it? But yeah, just if you want to speak briefly to this.
Shall I speak to my points? Am I assuming that everybody's seen all the information and it's the same information? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So my points are, and I'm sure if any trade. Oh, has somebody got their hand up? Sorry. Do I need to wait?
No, you go first. No. I'll put Vanessa in afterwards.
I'll bring the bullet points forward that I was going to say, and then if I've missed anything, then people can speak to that. So obviously all schools are legally obliged to consult with members, and this is a very straightforward way of meeting that legal obligation, that they can speak directly to us, that we can feed back to members. We do the legwork, if you like, from that point of view. We obviously would still consult on policies if our local officers weren't released on facilities time. That would have to be the case. We would have to support with capability, we would have to support with absence meetings, and we would have to consult on those policies. The problem is that we would have to do that in a different way if local lay officers weren't released. So the potential for that is we'd have to get regional officers in, or people who are paid to do that job and therefore could be given time out of school. There wouldn't necessarily be an immediate response, which obviously we're hoping to give at the moment. We give as soon, as quick a response as we can now. And if those cases were referred to regional officers, they would provide the support. But what we would lose then is that localism that we've got at the moment, that I hope everybody's been able to make the most of, I think, particularly during COVID. that we, during facilities time, we're able to develop that close network between officers and school leadership, between HR teams and staff. And this has prevented a lot of the formality. It's prevented the need for us in a lot of cases. So we don't need to go to formal meetings because we are able to resolve these things informally, because we are able to have that informal relationship and those conversations. A lot of staff will pick up the phone to a named lay officer that they know, and we can particularly speak to this during COVID, that's been able to happen and resolve those issues. I mean, the fact that I've just got here, I think demonstrates how well that's worked in a sense as well with that facility time, that my school are able to release me on the days that I have facility time. The rest of the time I am a full-time teacher to those classes. They don't know that I'm not full-time, if you like, that I'm able to be released for that time. And the schools arrange, you know, from my school's point of view, they would always release me. My school is really, really supportive. They would release me for those meetings. But what they're able to do is timetable me around that, so I am still a full-time teacher, if you like. And that expertise that I'm able to bring to that role, and all the other officers are able to bring, that we have the lived experience. A lot of us work within that system, and our support is based on knowledge and experience of what we are doing. We're able to see solutions that have worked in other schools and in other environments. We're able to bring that to the TUPE negotiations that happen, but also, you know, to the policy consultations, and also to some of those things such as flexible working appeals that we do a lot of. We have seen solutions and we're able to work those. Okay, I can see obviously other people want to prompt, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you so much. I'll go to Vanessa first because she had her hand up first.
That was an error, Peter. I hadn't put it down since the last vote. Apologies.
No, that's all right. Karen, your hand was up, but it's gone down again. Are you?
Yeah, same thing. I'd forgotten to take it down. Sorry.
Oh, all right. Oh, that's a quick way of doing it. Daniel. Daniel, yes, please. Daniel Perryman.
Hi. I would like to support Elaine in all what she's saying, as I'm also in the same position as Elaine as a
Gone back on mute, Daniel.
Oh.
Trying to get the hand down and I pressed the wrong button. So
okay.
Yeah, as I'm also a full-time teacher and work in schools as well, in a different way, but also in the front line. I'd like to thank every head teacher in here today and all across Northamptonshire with the really difficult situation we are with COVID. I think the relationship with having that facility time and with the heads and the schools have really increased, and it shows how important the time that we have had to spend to help and to have information from schools and some ways to guide when it comes down the council and everyone else when it comes to risk assessments and other things like that. It's been a really open relationship, and it just goes to show that, you know, the facility that we get from you has really showed
could I ask, if you're not speaking, if you can mute, because it's really hot. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Ben.
No, you're fine. That's fine. It's really been helpful to have that, and I think it's put a lot of our members' minds at rest, knowing that we can get to situations quite quickly and to solve a lot of things, especially what Elaine has just been saying. The support is so important, not only for the schools, but all the members that we have and the staff within it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it. Yeah. If any questions.
Richard's also got his virtual hand up. So yeah. Thank you.
Is that for me? Is that?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Very quickly. The current rate is £2.10. I just wanted to say that as unions, we have considered the fact that, number one, We're still transitioning into the unitary stuff, and we respect that. We're still in COVID recovery, but more recently in COVID, more restrictions, and we respect the extra expenses that schools have had. And obviously from April that you're going to be incurring extra costs in terms of national insurance as employers. So we've taken that all into consideration, but we just needed to just to explain that the average for the East Midlands is at £3.56. So we've considered those prices, we've considered the conditions that you're working under, and again repeat Daniel's thanks to you all with regarding COVID. Many schools and head teachers have been saying it's been tougher since September than it was all through lockdown. So we understand that. So I just wanted to explain why it's kept at £2.10. Obviously that can't continue in the future. We've got to look at how we can increase that with increased costs ourselves. But I just wanted to explain the rationale for the decision at keeping it £2.10. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to say anything on this one? No. Just glancing at the chat, I think this is just for maintained schools. Somebody's nodding at me. Yes, that's right. So it says here that voting for this item is primary maintained members only.
Can I just say, Richard speaking, if there are any secondary maintained schools, then I would imagine they can vote, but I imagine most of them are all academies.
I think they're all academies, yeah.
They're all academies.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to vote on the trade union dedelegation at £2.10 per pupil. Just primary academy people can vote. Primary maintained people can vote. And that is probably just Eliza and Daniel, is it? Oh, and John.
Correct, Chair. So
Thank you.
3 representatives.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's unanimous. Thank you very much. School improvement grant dedelegation. Anybody want to make any comments?
Yeah, that's me. Very, very briefly. You can see from B under heading 2. There were 6 responses. 3 responses agreed with the £7.50 rate. 3 responded with other. So it was a bit mixed, but the service does provide for assistance heads. It is generally used within the year. If we have any carry forward, reduce the rate, and the rate we anticipate needing in the 2022-23 year is £7.50.
Thank you. I think this is just for our primary maintained friends as well. So. Yep. Those in favour? There's only 3 of you. Eliza's disappeared off my screen. Oh, there you are. Yes, good. Thank you. All in favour. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And then on the redundancy funding, now it says £8 or £5.
Right. So I'll speak to this quickly, Chair. Basically, there was support for a lower level. We set out £8 as the level that we need. I've had an internal discussion on this before Schools Forum Chair, and these are, of course, extra costs for maintained schools over and above academy schools in their delegated budgets. My feeling is we can probably manage with the lower amount. That may create a small overspend within the year, but this is not the only way of supporting redundancies. Schools need to support it first with their own funds. If they can't, then we have to step in legally for the schools for which we're accountable. If it turns out that the £5 delegated rate de-delegation is insufficient, we will cover it in year, and then we'll come back saying it was insufficient next year and we need to raise it and have a vote on that. For the moment, I'm content that the maintained schools vote as they wish. So just hold a vote. Who votes for £5? Who votes for £8?
Right. I'm going to go for this then. So I'm going to say to our primary maintained colleagues, those in favour of £5. I thought you might all be in favour of £5.
That's absolutely fair enough.
Thank you very much, folks. I think we all need a break now. That was hard work. From the ESFA has said I was all right with what I did, so that's all right. And it's 3 now, so can we come back at 3:30, please? Go and get yourself
Okay.
a coffee.